She sat in the corner of the barn, silent, still, and broken. The man who bought her thought she was deaf. Everyone did. Sold by her drunk father for $3. She hadn't spoken a single word in weeks. Not a cry. Not a sound. Just emptiness. The rancher who took her in was a lonely soul himself, living in shadows, grieving in silence, speaking only to the wind. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need answers. But what he didn't know was that the girl heard everything. Every whispered word. Every creak of the floor. Every cry he let slip when he thought no one was listening. And then, one night, under the faint light of a dying fire, she whispered. Just one word, and it shattered everything. Who was she really? What secret had she buried so deep it nearly consumed her? And why, after all that time, did she finally choose to speak? This isn't just a story about pain. It's a story about a broken girl and the man who became the father she never had, until the truth she'd hidden left him frozen in tears. Don't blink. What you're about to hear will stay with you forever. Before we begin, if stories like this move your heart and stay with you long after the screen fades, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to Legacy Ignited for more true, powerful stories that speak to the soul. Your support helps us keep sharing the voices that were once silenced. Follow along and become part of a community where stories still matter. Now, let's return to the quiet ranch, where a single whisper changed everything. The wind howled across the wide, empty plains of New Mexico as Clyde Bennett rode his horse back from the county auction. A grizzled, quiet rancher in his late 50s, Clyde had long accepted the silence that filled his ranch as part of the life he chose. But that day, silence had taken a new form. Sitting quietly in his wagon, wrapped in a torn shawl, was a little girl who hadn't spoken a single word. She was about 12. Dirt clung to her small face. Her dark hair was tangled and unkempt, and her eyes, they were strange. Not blank, not scared, just distant. The drunk man who'd sold her at the back of the livestock barn had slurred. She don't talk. Can't hear either. Useless thing. Take her for $3, or I'll leave her for the wolves. Clyde didn't speak. He simply pulled out the money, handed it over, and nodded. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way her eyes avoided everyone's. Maybe it was the way she flinched at the man's touch. Or maybe it was just that Clyde was tired of being the only soul in a house full of ghosts. Back at the ranch, he didn't ask her name. He figured she wouldn't answer anyway. Instead, he gave her a room in the loft, a plate of stew, and a blanket. She ate slowly, eyes lowered, every movement cautious, like she was expecting someone to strike her for eating too much. Days passed, then weeks. She didn't speak, didn't smile, but she listened, or at least she seemed to. Clyde would talk to her sometimes, out of habit more than hope. Fixing the fence today, he'd mutter while pouring his coffee. She'd be outside 5 minutes later, holding a hammer. Horse through a shoe, he'd grumble. She'd be at the stable, waiting. He started calling her Ray, after the morning sun that barely reached the edge of her bedroom window. She never reacted to the name, but he kept using it. Somehow it fit. Clyde wasn't used to company, but Ray's silence was a kind of presence he'd never known before. It didn't demand anything. It didn't shout or ask or break things. It just was. But something about her didn't sit right. He once dropped a plate in the kitchen. It shattered. She didn't even flinch. Another time, a snake coiled near the barn door, and the horses went wild. Ray just stood there, watching them buck and scream, her face blank. She never reacted to sound, never responded to voices. But there were moments when Clyde caught her looking at him from behind corners, her eyes narrow, thoughtful, not like someone watching noise, but like someone watching people. Then came the night everything changed. It was just after harvest. Clyde had been up late oiling the toolshed door, while Ray sat by the hearth, pretending to read an old book. The wind had picked up again, rattling the windows like old bones. He stepped inside and paused at the doorway, watching her. She wasn't reading. Her eyes weren't on the page. They were focused, too focused, on the flames in the fireplace. Her fingers were tracing letters in the air, slowly, deliberately, not in confusion, but in memory. He cleared his throat. She didn't move. He stepped closer, boots creaking on the wooden floor. Still no response. But just as he reached the chair beside her, she froze. Her hand stopped midair. Her posture straightened, and ever so slightly, her head tilted toward him. Clyde's heart paused. "Ray," he said quietly. No reaction, but something in her stillness wasn't right. It wasn't the stillness of someone who didn't hear. It was the stillness of someone pretending not to. The next morning, Clyde tested her. He dropped a tin bucket behind her as she swept the porch. No flinch. He whispered her name from across the field when the wind was down. No turn. But then, just as he gave up, he muttered under his breath while walking past, "Wish I knew what went on in that head of yours." And for a fraction of a second, Clyde saw it, the flicker in her eyes. The smallest shift, like a crack in a dam holding back a flood. That night, he couldn't sleep. Memories of her posture, her expressions, haunted him. A child completely deaf, yet somehow aware of too much. A child beaten by a drunk father, sold for pocket change, yet with the poise of someone trained to survive, who taught her to trace letters in the air, who taught her to stand still like stone when danger was near. And why, in all these weeks, had she never once cried? Just after midnight, Clyde walked to the barn. He needed air, needed space from the questions clawing at him. But as he opened the door to the stable, he heard it. Not loud, not clear, but real. A voice. Soft, broken. From the corner. He turned slowly and saw her. Ray, kneeling beside an old saddle. Hands clasped, eyes closed, whispering into the leather. Her lips moved with trembling care. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't take her. Please." Clyde couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She was speaking. She could speak, which meant she could hear. The girl he thought was deaf, the girl sold to him like broken cattle, had just shattered everything he believed. But the worst part wasn't that she'd hidden it. It was why. Clyde stood there in the cold barn, his calloused hands hanging useless by his sides, eyes locked on the trembling child kneeling before the old saddle. Ray's voice, soft, almost broken, echoed in the wooden rafters like a ghost that shouldn't exist. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't take her. Please." Each word struck him like a hammer. She wasn't deaf. She never had been. She had heard everything, every whispered word, every creaking floorboard, every cautious step he took around her. And for all these weeks, she'd worn silence like armor. Clyde took one step forward. The boards creaked under his weight. Ray's head snapped up. Her eyes met his. Terror exploded across her face. She stumbled backward, hands raised instinctively, as if expecting a blow. Her lips parted, but no sound came this time. Just a soft, strangled breath like the kind people make when their nightmares catch up to them. "I didn't mean to," she stammered, voice raw, panicked. "Please don't send me back. I'll be quiet. I promise I'll be good." "Ray," Clyde said gently, barely above a whisper, "you can speak." She froze again, her small chest heaving. Then slowly, she nodded, ashamed. Clyde stepped closer, cautiously, like he would with a wounded animal. Why pretend? Why lie? His voice cracked, not from anger, but from heartbreak. She sat down, knees pulled tight to her chest, arms hugging them close. "Because if I talk, they hurt me more." Clyde knelt beside her, the old wood groaning under his knees. His face was pale, his eyes wide, and he felt like the wind had been knocked clean out of him. "They, my father," she whispered, "and the others." Clyde said nothing. He waited. Ray looked down at her fingers, twisting them nervously. "At first, I tried to speak, tried to tell someone. But Papa, he told him I was lying, so he made me stop. Every time I cried or talked or even screamed, he'd say, 'No one listens to broken girls.' So I stopped." The fire inside Clyde's chest wasn't rage. It was something worse. A slow, boiling grief. Grief for a child stripped of her voice, her freedom, her worth. "How long?" he asked. "Since I was little. I learned if I pretended to be deaf. They left me alone. They stopped talking to me, stopped blaming me. I became invisible. Safe." Her voice cracked again. "And when he sold me, I thought maybe I could disappear for good." Clyde looked at her, really looked at her. This wasn't just a child who'd been silenced. She was a child who had survived silence, who'd carved safety into her own cage, because it was the only way she knew to survive. "I'm sorry," he said, voice barely holding. "I should have known. Should have seen." She blinked. "Why are you sorry?" He swallowed hard. "Because you deserved someone to fight for you long before now." Silence settled again. Only this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy with truths finally spoken. Ray looked at him with eyes too old for her years. "I watch everything. I had to. Watching kept me alive. I saw you fix the barn door. Feed the animals before yourself. You never yelled. You never drank. That's how I knew. Maybe you wouldn't hurt me." Clyde's throat tightened. "You were testing me?" She nodded. "Every day. And tonight?" "I was talking to my sister," she said softly. "She died last winter. I still talk to her sometimes." Clyde closed his eyes. It was too much. One child sold like livestock, another gone forever, and between them, a girl still pretending to be deaf, just to breathe easier in a world that had never loved her right. But he didn't touch her, didn't rush to hug or fix. He just stayed with her there, on the cold barn floor, sharing the silence now filled with understanding. The next morning, Ray didn't hide. She came down for breakfast, sat across from Clyde, and whispered thank you before eating. It was a whisper, yes, but it was real. Her voice trembled, but she used it. That alone was a miracle. She began speaking more, little by little, like someone learning to walk again. She'd ask questions, simple ones. "What's that tool called? Can I feed the goats today? Why does the sky change colors at night?" And Clyde, in return, would answer like a man who'd just found a second chance. Not just for her, but for himself too. But what broke him completely came a week later. It was late again. They were sitting by the fire, a soft storm drumming against the roof. Ray had drawn something on a scrap of paper, a house, a sun, a small girl holding hands with a tall man. "That's you," she said, pointing. "And that's you?" he asked. She nodded, smiling. Then she added something. A word. Just one. She leaned over the drawing and scribbled 4 letters below the tall man's feet. "Papa." Clyde stared at it, stunned. Tears welled in his eyes. You want me to be your..." "I already decided," she whispered. "You saved me, and I want to be yours, if you'll have me." His hand trembled as he touched the paper. Then he pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in over 20 years, Clyde Bennett cried. Not because he was broken, but because something lost had finally come home. The lonely rancher who bought a deaf girl had found a daughter who'd been listening all along. Winter came early that year. The mountains wore their white coats like ancient kings, and the wind howled across the plains as if remembering every sorrow that had ever touched the earth. But inside the old ranch house, something had changed. Ray's laughter, once locked in silence, now echoed softly through the halls. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It was real. She helped feed the animals, painted flowers on the barn door, whispered bedtime stories to the old horse who had once scared her. And every night, she left a candle on the windowsill. "For my sister," she'd say, "so she knows I'm okay now." Clyde never asked her to forget. He never asked her to stop mourning. He just gave her space to heal. And in return, she gave him a kind of light he hadn't known he was missing. But healing is never a straight path. One morning, Ray froze in the middle of milking a goat. Her face went pale, her body stiff. "What is it?" Clyde asked gently. She pointed through the frosted glass. A man stood at the fence, drunk, staggering, shouting something unintelligible. Her father. Clyde stepped outside, quiet but firm. The man slurred curses, claimed Ray was his, demanded her back. Clyde didn't raise his voice. He simply looked the man dead in the eye and said, "You sold her for $3. That's all you ever thought she was worth. But now, she's priceless. You lost her the day you let go." The man spat on the dirt, stumbled, and left. Ray watched from the window, shaking, not from fear, but from relief. "You didn't yell," she said later. "You didn't hit him. You didn't even flinch." "I wasn't protecting her from him," Clyde told the sheriff later that day. I was protecting her from becoming what he tried to make her. That night, Ray came to his room, holding the old picture she'd drawn. She'd added something new, beside Papa. She'd written her name in bold, careful letters. Ray Bennett. Clyde looked at it for a long time. Then he reached into his drawer and handed her a silver pendant. It was old, worn, his late wife's. She would have wanted you to have this, he said. And so do I. Ray took it like it was the most sacred thing in the world. Then she whispered, "Can I call you Dad now?" His voice broke. "You always could." She leaned into him, arms around his chest, head against his heart. He held her there, tight, like he'd never let go. Outside, snow fell in silence. But inside there was warmth, love, and the sound of two souls, once shattered, finally whole. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If it touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep inside, please consider subscribing to Legacy Ignited, where every story honors the strength of the human spirit. Your time means everything to us. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop listening to the unheard.